melt is when I ocean wave.
You bet.
Today on Nova Legends podcast, I'm going to preview the state finals with the great Matthew Hatfield from Virginia Preps. Matthew is the indispensable source for Virginia football. Does so much to keep us updated and makes us enjoy the football season. Also, basketball, field hockey, and other sports. Matthew can be seen on his website, the YouTube site, which we'll put on the in the comments section, and also so many other things that he does. Matthew, good seeing you. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Julian. It's a fun time of year, and I haven't even started Christmas shopping. I'll do it like the last minute. I'm sure hustle and bustle and get a bunch of gift cards to make people happy, hopefully.
Yeah, well, with team football, basketball, Old Dominion, I'm sure you're not getting much rest these days. But yeah. So anyway, let's get right. I know you got a tight schedule. Let's get right into it. First, what are your general impressions of the year when you look at the state finals? It's a lot of the traditional powerhouses. There's not a whole lot of surprises. Lots of chalk in the finals. What are your general impressions of the season this year?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Going back to, we do the preseason top 10 rankings that we put out at the end of August. And in Class 6, the 1-2 teams that we had, Freedom and Highland Springs, who both won state championships, ironically enough, last year, although Highland Springs moved up from Class 5 to Class 6. In Class 5, our 1-2 was Maury Stonebridge. Here they are again for the third time since 2019. Riverheads won 7 consecutive state championships in Class 1, and I think this is going to make some fans out there mad of model programs like, Stonebridge and Salem and Phoebus and Highland Springs. It's not intended to, but they are the model program. They are the program of Virginia football really in the last, 2 decades. And there's been a lot of great programs, you think, to the glory years of Hampton in the 90s and Phoebus in 2000s and others that I just outlined. But they moved to Class 2. We expect them to be playing probably Graham or Radford in the final, and it's actually Radford, not Graham. Phoebus won back-to-back state championships, and if you follow their football, they're known for smash mouth and defense. And here they are again, moving up from Class 3 in Class 4 to play Salem, which is in the top 3 or 4 schools in VHSL history and state championships, and they have 2 All-Americans, so no shocker there. And in Class 3, you've got Liberty Christian, which is the lone private school in the picture, which we had in the top 3 beginning of the year, taking on Lafayette, who's just a couple seasons removed from a state championship from the COVID condensed season in the spring. So really everybody that we had was, I would say, highly ranked or, thought to be state level contenders. And if there's really a surprise, and there really isn't a big surprise to us on this, Julian, it would be Galax, only from the standpoint of, we thought they were a good football team, but they ended the regular season at 6-4. And though, they're known to be better than that, and they've been to some state championships before, they were a 5 seed to start regional. So outside of that, it's been pretty chalky the whole way through, which, it's good for March Madness and some surprises, some upsets, some 7 seeds to do this, pull it, but when you get to the very end of the tournament, you want the best of the best in a lot of ways, I do think. So
yeah. Was Galax in a district that was mixed and they had a lot of teams, higher divisions? Is that why the record was pretty above average?
Correct. They play they play a competitive schedule, first of all, at the Class 1 level. But, they've played some Glenvers, who's Class 2. They play some Grahams, who's Class 2. So they play some upper classifications. They have a throwback running back in Tedron Tucker, who I'm sure we'll talk about, that really makes them go. So there's not a lot of, I guess you could say, surprise element to them. When you get to the Class 1 and Class 2 level, you expect to have those teams there. I think the surprise to me was we didn't get Honaker, who we had preseason number 1 and was unbeaten in 13-0 with that air raid attack, throwing for so many yards and touchdowns behind Peyton Music and Parker Bandy. But Galax was able to wear down their defense and put up almost 50 points on them. So aside of that, it's pretty much status quo. A lot of the teams we expected to be here are here, and there hasn't been a real stunner or shocker, if you will, with the last 12 standing here in VHSL football.
Yeah. What happened to Graham this year? I know they had a tough running back last year. He graduated. They didn't replace him.
No, he was back. Tydros Clements. He got hurt early in the season, had an ankle issue. They ran into Union, one of their rivals out there in Southwest Virginia, lost to them in a close game, had a couple linemen dinged up, but then they got revenge against them in the Region 2D championship as the 2 seed beat the Bears, who were the 1 seed, 33-24 on the road. I thought at that point they were ready to beat Radford, because Radford, as much as they were blowing out people, had a 29-24 escape against the Glenford team they handled early in the regular season. So you look at two teams, you have rematches. You say Graham's trending up. Maybe Radford's kind of peaked a little bit with one of their best linemen being a freshman, but Radford was able to get the win 22-10 in that rematch, if you will, or I could say you wouldn't really rematch, but the matchup here again. And they've had some struggles with Graham in the past, but they have a great player in Landon Clark, quarterback who's thrown for a boatload of yards and touchdowns. He's going to Elon. He's a hard deal, and Graham just didn't have enough multi-dimension to go with Clements on the ground for their offense to score against the Radford defense, which stepped up in that game. So it wasn't a shocker. I actually wrote that I thought the two best semifinal games in terms of competitiveness would be Radford Graham and Phoebus King George. I actually went out on a limb and picked King George to beat Phoebus. I was looking right for three quarters, and Phoebus stepped it up in the fourth and final stanza. But Radford's got a really good program there. Like I mentioned, with Clark there at quarterback and Max Knipe, it's hard to deal with them. I think over the last two seasons, Clark has thrown for like 70, 80 touchdown passes, and he's a threat on defense too. He's had some pick sixes on defense and leads the team this year with 10 interceptions, 5 return for scores. So, it's a good team. And when you have that standout player to class 1, class 2 level, it can be the guy you get behind. Clements was that last year for Graham. I think for Radford this year, it's Clark for sure.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, you can't cash bets after three quarters. They have to finish the game, or they're not going to. So one thing I would say about we have 6 classifications. I think in the top 4, you can make an argument that you wouldn't know which of the chalk is which classification. If you look at Liberty Christian, if you look at Phoebus, if you look at Maury, if you look at Freedom, I guess the favorite against a tough Highland Springs program. All 4 of those teams are incredible programs, and they can beat anyone on any given night.
No question about it. I think the one that had the most chalk throughout the regional runs into states, Julian, was probably class 4, because you had in region A, 1, 2, 3, 4 made the semis. Region B, you had 1, 2, 3, 4 make the semis. 1, 2, 3, 4 made the semis in C, and then 1, 2, 3, 5 made the semis in D. When you look at the likes of Phoebus, Hampton, Churchland, War Hill, King George, Dinwiddie, Huguenot, Varina, Loudoun County, Tuscarora, Loudoun Valley, John Champ, Salem, Hanley, EC Glass, Jefferson Forest. But I think any way you slice this, though, the storyline that we had at the start of the year is you've got teams trying to win it again. And in 3 of those cases, it's doing it at a higher classification, with Highland Springs up from 5 to 6, Phoebus up from 3 to 4, and Riverheads up from 1 to 2. Now, the thing is, Highland Springs has taken on a team that set the state scoring record a year ago in Freedom. In Phoebus's case, they're playing Salem, who has got 2 All-Americans, and Peyton Lewis, a running back, going to Tennessee, and a linebacker in Chris Cole, who's going to Georgia, who, by the way, has 4 pick sixes. He's trying to catch Landon Clark at Radford, by the way. And then, as we just mentioned, Riverheads is playing Radford, who's undefeated this year, the only undefeated team standing left in Class 2. And all these teams we talked about are great. I think the most underappreciated team of all 12 is actually Essex, who is 14-0. And I keep coming back to this because it just boggles my mind. I cannot comprehend this, Julian. Their starting quarterback, Zay Bundy, was this team's center last year. We're not talking about playing basketball. He was the team's starting center last year. How they're here right now with literally 3 offensive starters back, basically a brand new defense, though their linebacker, Brian Roan's been player of the year, and he's been great making tackles. It boggles my mind to think they're still here, but Todd Jones and his coaching staff are just top-notch, and that's why they're here. And they're used to getting to this point. They had lost, I think, 7 straight playoff meetings to Riverhead. So they were glad that Riverheads moved up, much like Brentsville District was glad that Phoebus moved up. Only thing for Brentsville, unfortunately, was their starting quarterback, Caleb Alexander, got hurt. And Lafayette's a very good team, so they didn't see a cupcake, if you will, in their state semifinal.
Yeah. Well, Essex is a team that you've been touting for the last 2 years, so they've come through for you. So let's jump right in. Let's go to Class 6. Freedom and Highland Springs. Freedom really quiet this year, quietly beating every team 65-0. Really kind of staying below the radar after the Matha game. Highland Springs, they had a high profile loss to Maury. I think they lost 2 games, right, Matthew, or they just lost at 1 to Maury?
Highland Springs only lost the 1.
Okay.
They came close in a couple. They had a fourth quarter comeback in the last 2 minutes against Varina, and
That's
they
right.
also had to battle Manchester in the region championship 17-6 final. But Manchester had about 4 trips in the red zone. And they came up with some big takeaways.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they have 11:30 a.m. game Saturday at UVA at Scott Stadium against Freedom. Highland Springs had a very chippy semifinal game against Lake Braddock. I understand one of the best players The rumor is he can't play in the final. He got thrown out of the game. I'm not sure if that's true or not. So anyway,
I haven't heard. Yeah,
yeah,
it might be true. I haven't heard that.
that's what I hear. I'm not. There was a fight after the game, or it was a lunacy after the game. Anyway, Freedom had a very smooth road against Madison. I was there. I played great. Madison had no answer to them this year, and Jeff Overton, Juju Preston. I mean, I hate Tristan Trujillo, Tristan Evans Trio. I hate talking about their players because they have so many. But it was
forget somebody exactly.
Yeah.
It could be here all day.
But Highland Springs, very blue collar team. Just get to. So what's your thoughts about Highland Springs and Freedom?
I was just telling our reporter who's working on our preview, we'll have up on the website probably by Friday for folks on VirginiaPreps.com with some keys to victory. Danny Lewis, that generally, Julian, we have 6 state championships. There's always a couple duds. There's always some blowouts. That generally happens. You hate to forecast which will be the duds or blowouts, but there's going to probably be a classic as well. And if I was to forecast which one is the classic ultimately in this field, I feel like it's going to be the game with Freedom and Highland Springs. It just to me, it has that feel of a game that I think is going to be, 35-28, 31-27, 30-27. It could be a high scoring affair. I saw Highland Springs in the scrimmage preseason against Thomasdale, watched them against Maury, which was their lone blemish. They had a chance in that game. Second half made some plays, but Maury was just able to get some special teams spark plays. And Eric Bird brought him back, but they were missing a couple key guys in that game, were the Springers, including Noah Jenkins, who's important to them both offensively and defensively from his corner spot. Like you said with Highland Springs, you've got the state record setter and career touchdown passes in Tristan Evans. You've got Jeff Overton Jr., who in his first 3 region playoff games almost had 1,000 yards rushing, just that there alone. And it continues the debate of who the best junior running back is in 2025 in the state. And you got him and Gideon Davidson, who I'm sure we'll get to from Liberty Christian a little bit. But to me, this game, I think, is going to be decided line of scrimmage play, Julian, because there are so many good playmakers. And you do wonder if the Highland Springs secondary can hold up. But I go back to that game that Freedom had with Verina. And remember, they got to a big lead and Verina came roaring back. And I would wonder in this case if Coach Simmons, the D coordinator for Lauren Johnson at Highland Springs and Company, come up with some disguised blitzes, some stunts, some different twists and turns that maybe Freedom hasn't seen, and they're able to hold up. And then offensively, do they go to kind of the old, and this isn't because I was watching 30 for 30 late the other night up at 3 a.m. with the 2 Bills, Parcells and Belichick. But I got to think about
great
this.
one.
It's a great one. But do they go with that Giants game plan against the Bills of let's shorten the game, run the clock? They gave him Thurman Thomas to the Giants, but do they run the ball? And they try to play ball control, keep away from Freedom, which I think Highland Springs might have the personnel to do. Other teams don't, and they match up well enough on the outside to keep it tight. I still pick Freedom to win this game close. It would not surprise me if Highland Springs pulled it out because I think Christian Martin at quarterback, he's kind of had you mentioned about quiet year. He's had kind of a quiet year. Remember, he was a state player of the year last year in Class 5, and he put together some ridiculous numbers. And so far, coming in this game, he's thrown for 1,522 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, just 54% completions. He hasn't really had that mega performance monster game. He's run for 346 and 6 TDs. They have a running back, though, Eric Bird, who's very, very good, over 1,500 yards, 19 TDs, and he's a sophomore. So I think they have the personnel to keep this thing interesting and close. And I do wonder, you've seen Freedom. Freedom has a lot of good players, and looking at the all-region team, the all-region 6B team basically is the Freedom defense. But is the Freedom defense as good as last year's Freedom defense, which had TJ Bush set the edge there, who's now at Liberty? I don't know that it is. That would be my question here, is if Freedom's defense, they have to generate takeaways, and I'm not sure Martin's going to make the mistakes being a seasoned senior veteran. So I think this game's going to be fascinating. Special teams could come into play, and Freedom has weapons there, as we do well know, between the likes of Cam Courtney and Preston and fill in the blank. They got so many speedsters. But I think this is a good game, and line of scrimmage play, whoever can control the offensive front to allow the running game to get going could be a big deal. And the linebacker play is going to have to be good against the run too, because I think you're looking for all these big pass plays. It might offset itself to a degree. And I'm not sure that either secondary is going to be structured to give up the big plays. They'll kind of keep things underneath and make them have to go 12, 13 plays and beat them methodically.
Yeah. Matthew, what was that quarterback's name for Highland Springs?
Christian Martin. He's a Maryland commit.
Okay, yeah. How tall is he?
Christian is listed. He plays basketball too, by the way. At 6'3.5".
Okay.
About 6'3". About 6'3".
The reason I mentioned because I was at the Freedom game, and they're outside linebackers, defensive ends. I don't know what they call them. They're really tall. So
yes.
they gave the Madison team fits trying to see over those guys, whatever way they look. They were so tall. So I think a tall quarterback is going to be a very helpful for Highland Springs. Well, look, let's
Real quick,
move.
he lists himself, just to put it out there, I don't want to be correct later. He lists himself on his Twitter as 6'4". Rivals has him at 6'2", which was updated last year, and another site has 6'3". So it's like me, but depending on what convenience store I'm living, I'm between 6'2" and 6'4". I'm not
Exactly. I'm
so
6'4" also, Matthew.
but he
So
has pretty good size. He was a rebounder for their basketball team that won a state championship a couple years ago. So he's not he has that height, and also he runs the option game very well. So they're going to pose some challenges to Freedom's defense that they haven't seen, just like the Freedom offense is going to pose some challenges to the Highland Springs defense that they haven't seen, even having played the likes of Verona and Maury in a very good schedule.
no, exactly. That's good. Well, it's gonna be great. Well, let's move on. And again, Freedom is the defending champ in Class 6. In Class 5, Highland Springs is a defending champ. They beat Maury in the final last year. Maury, they have a claim to the best public school team in the region. If they can win this game, they've beaten Wise, the Maryland State champion. They've beaten Highland Springs, who's in the final in 6. Big win against Warwick. I mean, Maury arguably has had the toughest schedule of all this year. Maybe besides Stonebridge, but Stonebridge, the district schedule has been very soft. Anyway, so what do you see with Maury and Stonebridge?
Well, Maury had a struggle last week. They only won 55-0 against Indian River, and they only had 406 yards of offense, which was 108 less than they had when they had 514 on Warwick, when they put up over 40 points in the first half. And Warwick's defense was giving up just 3 points per game on the year, and Maury just overwhelmed both of them. Their defense and special teams came through in a big way to set the tone. A couple block punts against Indian River last week in a game we called Hatfield on the NFHS network. Mickey Thompson is an unbelievable coach at Stonebridge. He's going into the Hall of Fame one day. But I will say this: if he wins this game, they should just put him in the Hall of Fame when it hits triple zeros, because Stonebridge has got a very good football team. Don't get me wrong. Brandon Pena has stepped up at quarterback. Naheem Gladding catching the football. Troy Marquez, player of the year, running it. Miles Turpin, Wake Forest commit up front. I think they're always solid. And defensively, a lot of different guys have stepped up on the back end for their secondary to go with Jonathan Newton at linebacker, and list of names we can go through, which, Mickey's got, this is the 12th time they're in a state championship, Julian, which is just incredible. But Maury's on a different level than I think just about everybody this year. They're a machine. Their new quarterback, Autori Newkirk, it gives them a dual threat, which they probably haven't had to this degree. Their backups, there's no drop off when your fourth and fifth running backs can get 60, 70 yards, and that's what they've done this year. They have a three-headed monster back there with Melvin Lowe, Damari Palmer, and Leon Fatman Clark, which is a great nickname there. And the receiving core, as great as it is, they're missing one of their best receivers in Javani Wiggins, but LeBron Bond has stepped up in a big way. Fred J.R. Johnson's a South Carolina commit for defense. He wrecks the game on the edge. Here's the best stat about them, Julian. They've got 15 defensive touchdowns this year. 15. Now, all you hear about is this Maury offense, but they've got 15 defensive touchdowns, 9 between two guys in Johnson and Leslie Hines, who is the unheralded defensive end, opposite Johnson, who's an outside backer, and Ari Watford, who's a top 250 recruit in the country in the junior class that walked into Maury this year from Salem High and Virginia Beach. Mickey's going to have to go to a similar type of game plan. Like I said, that going back to that Giants Bills, he's going to have to go to that type of game plan too, to kind of slow it down from that Super Bowl and not let Maury get a full head of steam. They've gotten off to such fast starts. Stonebridge got behind in the 2019 title game, rallied to make it close at Hampton University before falling by a touchdown. We know the dramatic, thrilling finish when they won it with Jacob Thomas to Zeke Wimbush at Old Dominion a couple years ago. And I think that still stings in the back of the minds of some of the Maury seniors. You have some of them on this field in this game, like Johnson, who I mentioned, Devontae Floyd, who's a wide receiver, defensive back going to Duke, and some others that were integral parts when they lost to Stonebridge in a heartbreaking fashion at home. So Stonebridge's gonna have to play a clean game. And as crisp as they've been lately, especially since they're very hard to schedule out of the gate. Remember, now they played some good teams with the good councils, with the Martinsburg from West Virginia, Madison game one was thrilling. Yeah, Quince Orchard. I mean, their first 4 or 5 games was really, really good. And I think what you go back to in those games, I think if you gave Mickey Thompson truth serum, he'd tell you we showed up to a degree in 2.5 of those games, played well. We got, kind of got blown out in one other game, we had a bad half. So I think he realizes Maury's just got a distinct edge athletically and speed wise. So now how do you slow them down? And I just don't think the matchup's as good this year for Stonebridge as it has been the last couple of times, and it's going to be hard. They're going to have to win the turnover battle, limit the explosive plays, get some type of special teams play, and then have a trick player to go their way. You're asking Maury to play like a C-level game, which they haven't done all year. I think this team is ascending at the right time, and I don't think this is going to be as competitive as the Classics game at UVA. Although it would be neat to see another Classic between these two schools that are sort of developing a 7-5-7 Nova rivalry the last couple times they've met. As there's not I don't think they're the friendliest of foes, if you will, either. So
Yeah. Well, there's not many friendly foes at this level. This
no,
this is combat. Well, let's keep going. Let's go to Class 4. We got Salem. Really big win last week. I don't know if it was a surprise, but I think Tuscarora had some momentum coming in, and I know in the DC area at least I heard how tough they were. And Phoebus. Phoebus, they have an argument as the best program in the state, even though obviously Freedom, Highland Springs, Maury are amazing as well. I'm not getting into that argument. But anyway, so what do you see with Salem and Phoebus?
by the way, Phoebus shouldn't have that argument with those schools. They just have it with Riverheads because Riverheads has won the 7 straight state titles, 2 different levels, I know, obviously. And Phoebus has got this run of 9. And I put it out last week. The number of region titles since 2001 is just, it's sick. It's amazing what they've done from the late, great Bill D to Stan Sexton and now Jeremy Blunt, a former state champion player who's going for a three-peat at Phoebus. And their defense is for real. I said it back in August, Julian, when I saw them in a scrimmage against Salem of Virginia Beach, not the Salem they're playing from Roanoke this time, that watching them hit, they got a linebacker named Brendan Thompson, who I think is the most underrated linebacker in the state. I said last year I thought Brennan Johnson from Highland Springs was ascending into the best linebacker in the state. And by the way, you got Chris Cole for Salem in this game, who's going to Georgia, who won the last 2 national titles. One, unfortunately, won't win it this year because Alabama took him out in the SEC championship game. But in Thompson, he gets to just roam free and play, recklessly in a way because you've got these defensive ends who crashed down on Anthony Reddick going to Maryland, Stevenson going to Old Dominion, Tayshawn Stevenson, who are really, really active and athletic, long, lanky types. And I would worry about the matchup that would concern me if I'm Don Holter and the Spartans in this game is being able to block Salem up front. King George had to worry about that last week. They had a lead through 3 quarters of play, got 2 great stops at the goal line. But as prolific as their offense is, with 2 dynamite wide receivers in Mekhi White, a Maryland commit, and Chance Wiggins, the future Virginia Tech Hokie, they didn't have an offensive touchdown against the Phoebus defense, which, Phoebus has been known historically for some great defenses. All 11 defensive starters went on to play college football on their famed 2008 team that won the championship. Last year's defense was legendary and put up some eye-popping numbers. And then their defense this year, think about this, Julian, they've played 14 football games. They've given up 44 points, just 3.1 a game. The only 2 teams that cracked double digits were King George with 13, War Hill with 13 the last 2 weeks. So you're talking about, prior to that, you're looking at 8 shutouts? And people know about that 104-0 Jamestown game in the quarterfinals. But my question for Phoebus was the offense, because you had another injury at quarterback for the 2nd straight year during the postseason. Last year, before the championship game, it was Nolan James going down, and Jaden Early had to convert from wide receiver to play the quarterback spot against Heritage of Lynchburg, who they had a distinct athletic edge with Jordan Bass at wide receiver, who's now at Pitt, and some other playmakers. This year, the Phoebus offense isn't as high octane. They do have some weapons like Keontae Gray and Paul Stephen Davis. Got a really good grinded out running back in Davion Roberts, who's getting better and better. I think he's as underappreciated a back as there is. He's not talked about with the likes of the Overtons, the Eric Birds, the Gideon Davidsons, but he's very consistent. He's small, but he runs hard and tough. And I wondered about Maurice Banks coming in after the playoff game when Adonis Stowers got hurt against Hampton. Could he steer the attack well? And he's done that. He's been a game manager as a 9th grader. He's going to be a very good one for years to come. Salem can win this game. They're playing closer to home. They will have a huge fan support. They can win this game. But I am learning my lesson from last week picking against them. I'm not picking against them 2 weeks in a row, Julian. They're the defending 2-time champs for a reason. And I just don't love the matchup for Salem up front. Everywhere else, I think Salem's got very, very good speed, and they match up on the outside well with a lot of track kids from their championship track teams like Lewis, like Persinger, these guys on the outside that are really dynamic players. I just wonder if they can sustain offense and get drives going against that Phoebus defense. That Phoebus defense is the real deal, and Salem has to play a great game and hope that the freshman shows he's a freshman in the spot, which after a couple of playoff games and beating King George down in the 4th quarter to start against War Hill, I don't think he's lacking for confidence now, and I think the coaching staff at Phoebus will do a good job to take the game out of his hands to have to win it, if you will. If Salem is able to force him to have to win it and make Phoebus play from behind, advantage Salem. But even King George, who I thought was the best, most equipped team to put them down multiple scores, couldn't do it. So hard to see anybody doing it unless you're playing maybe a Freedom or a Maury. I got Phoebus winning this game, but it should be a good game, lower scoring game, something like 20-13, 21-14, 14-7 type of game. I'll be surprised if your team gets above 24 in this one.
Yeah. Well, one thing about Phoebus, they have not been really tested in the last 2 years. So you wonder how they're going to respond in a close game. Most of these teams have had a test or two, but Phoebus has really had things their own way the last couple of years. So I wonder if Salem can stay in there, can they respond?
Mostly, but I would say that was their test this past week against King George. At Darling Stadium, you're taking on a team that really can push you here. It was 13-10, 13-12 going into the fourth quarter, and they rallied to get it done and take it, Julian, in the fourth quarter, 25-13. Now, I think the way to beat this Phoebus defense is you have to have some really good receivers. Salem's got some good receivers, but you also have to have a mobile quarterback who can be a magician, almost like a Newkirk or someone on his feet. Christian Martin, we talked about, that can really make some plays on the move. And while Salem's quarterback is good, and Eli Taylor, I don't know that he's a magician type that you just count on to go run for 75 to 100 yards in this spot, nor is that how their offense is constructed to do it. Now, Peyton Lewis is a special back, and this could be a game where he replicates what he did against EC Glass when he had 146 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a TD saving tackle, a 2-point conversion. I think he sold popcorn at halftime. But as good as he is, you're asking him to do that against this defense, which it hasn't been done all year. So until that happens against that defense, which is coming off back-to-back state titles, the win streak is now at like 34 for Phoebus. I have a hard time seeing it unless they can get those interceptions like they had against Glass when they had 4 of them, a couple of them from Josiah Persinger, and Josiah Moyer had one, and Chris Cole had a pick 6 in that game. They would have to get some defensive plays to ignite the offense and let them settle in and then force Phoebus to abandon the running game and have to throw it downfield and put them in a spot. So if you're going to beat Phoebus, you have to jump on them early and take that almighty defense where they've already been scored on once or twice, or you've gotten a couple of points on the board. So it takes the pressure off your own offense.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, we got a hard stop in 7 minutes. You got 2.5 minutes on these last 3 games. Let's start with Liberty Christian. They've been devastating this year, and they play against Lafayette. Lafayette was I don't know if it was a surprise last week, but I thought Brentsville was highly regarded. It went, I believe they went up to Brentsville, and they a nice win. So what do you see in that game?
Yeah, 17-7 was a good job by Andy Lynn's team to get it done against Brentsville, who's got a pretty good defense, led by Coach Lauren White's son, Langston. Lafayette has really stepped it up in the playoffs. I do think Andy Lynn knows this is a hard game to win because Gideon Davidson, who's going to Clemson, is one of the very best running backs in the state. He can take those runs and break them off for, long gainers. And, Lafayette, I don't know if they're as multi-dimensional and as consistent. Some of their better guys defensively are undersized. Like take, for example, Peter Cook. He's a 5'9" defensive end who just, runs hard, blue collar type of kid. But Liberty Christian is big on the line. Easton Ware, who's going to Clemson, he opens up those holes and allowed Davidson to rush for 229 and 4 TDs in last week's 49-6 pounding of a very good William Byrd team. You throw in there Wes Woodard and I think Frank Rocco's group. They're sensing the opportunity to make some history, become the first private school to win a state championship. They're right there in their own backyard at Liberty University where they played before. They're familiar with the surface, and Lafayette would have to get a big special teams play, a trick play early to get this going. I think it's going to be hard to run the ball consistently with Nazir Walmart and James Spencer like they have throughout this playoff run. And Liberty Christian, they just, they didn't give up outside of an 88-yard kickoff return for a score to William Byrd. They gave up nothing with their defense. I think their defense is very, very sound right now. They allow just 104 total yards of offense. So I could see Lafayette getting stuck, being a little one-dimensional, having to convert third downs to extend drives here. Whereas, LCA, I think their quarterback, Jeb Moon, can just be that play-action guy, use his feet and not have to sling it down the field. I think Liberty Christian is going to be in cruise control in this game, and I don't see it being as tough a call as maybe the Class 2 and Class 1 games, which I view in a lot of ways, Julian, as toss-ups potentially.
Yeah, well, it's not the backyard. Liberty is actually their front yard because these are home games for them. So let's go to Class 2. Let's go to two amazing programs, Riverheads and Radford. Last year's state champion, as you mentioned earlier. Graham is no longer in contention. What do you see in this great matchup?
Listen, it's foolish of me. This is going to be the pick I made last week with Phoebus going down. It's foolish of me to go against Riverheads, which is the well-oiled machine, which is won like 33, 34 playoff games in a row. And they have Triple C Caden Cook Cash, who is arguably the best player on the field every time he takes the field. He had 1,297 yards and 20 touchdowns coming into the state semifinals, and he was the state player of the year in Class 1 as a sophomore and junior. He's been offered by UVA. But I think in this spot, Landon Clark could be the most versatile guy, and he's got Max Knipe who can throw it, who can catch it on his deep bomb throws. He's got a good group of receivers. Riverheads does not throw it very much. They're one-dimensional. They only attempted 31 passes in their first 13 games. So if Radford is able to buckle down the run well enough, then they didn't let Chydras Clements run wild. I think they can do it here against Riverheads in a very, very close ball game. I don't know that Riverheads has seen a team that can spread you out the way that you could argue Radford will do and has done. McCosin didn't have the passing attack, and Riverheads hasn't seen teams like this that can kind of, stretch you wide. So that to me is going to be the difference in a game where I do think the Bobcats will have some trouble defensively out of the gate to get this one, where they want it. But when it gets moving forward, I think they'll make the right adjustments. And Landon Clark, his ability to run will also open up the passing game too, because has to also play him on the rollouts.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Matt. Well, let's go to Class 1. Last year's champion Riverheads is no longer Class 1. They're Class 2. It's a classic Class 1 matchup between Northern Neck and Appalachia. We got Galax from the foothills against Essex, and Essex with the center playing quarterback, as you said earlier, and Galax maybe the only dark horse in a final game. So what do you see in this game?
Essex's offense didn't do a whole heck of a lot against Alta Vista. This game was 8-0 at the half. They tacked on another touchdown with a 2-point conversion in the third quarter with Maury Walker. But they don't have a Cam Robinson who they had last year, who was their big play wide receiver guy that could allow them to be a little more multidimensional. I would just wonder about them in that spot if they have enough offense. Whereas Galax, they're very predictable as well. They like to run the football with Tedron Tucker. But I like the fact that they're coming off maybe their sharpest offensive showing against Honaker. They put up 49 in the last round, and I think they're gaining more and more confidence. They won with defense, 14-0 against Grayson County in the semifinals, 17-14 against George Wythe in the regional championship game. And I like the way they're trending. They're not a typical 5 seed, which is what they were to start their regional playoffs. And I was very impressed that their defense didn't let Honaker completely throttle them, which it could certainly do. They have some experienced guys to go with Tucker on the offense, with Austin Ashworth and Colton Coombs, a couple of guys that have between them, 60 catches or so. And Tommy Jones, their 10th grade quarterback, he's pretty efficient. He's only thrown, I think, 3 interceptions in the first, 13, 14 games here. So I think they'll protect the football. I think this is going to be a close to the vest 14-7 type of game. And they're the last Class 1 program to win a state championship, not named Riverheads. So why not be the first one to win it after Riverheads leaves, with Tucker wanting to cap out his brilliant career? He's run for close to, I want to say, 5,000-6,000 yards the last couple of years. He's just a tremendous back, and this could be his I wouldn't say his coming out party, but his defining moment of his career, if you will, in a 14-13, 20-16 type of game, or 20-12 type of game. I don't know if it'll have as many exciting plays with the drama that Freedom and Highland Springs could produce in an epic classic, but this could be a very equally tight ball game that goes down to the last play.
Yeah. Well, Matt, look, this has been great. Thanks again for. I promise you 6 o'clock. I think we're gonna make it. Thanks for all you do. This is another Rain Man type performance. You prove again you're a primetime player. Safe travels with Old Dominion, folks. Can find you at virginiapreps.com. Also, Coach and Matthew Hatfield on the YouTube channel. What's the proper name for that, Matthew?
Yeah, it's 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Find us on the Virginia Beach Sportsplex YouTube channel. We'll have it all up on my Twitter X feed at Hatfield Sports. And I might see you at UVA for there on Saturday, Julian.
I'll see you there. And don't forget to subscribe to Matthew and Coach, who I think his coach is going into the Hall of Fame. But Matthew, thanks again for all you do. And let's get together before Christmas and talk some basketball.
Sounds like a plan. Have a good one, Julian.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. Talk to you soon.